Context, context, context.
Have you ever seen one of these machines and thought, how do you use these? Well, today I'm here to show you. My name is Rene Perez Jr., founder of ContextRE, which is based on the idea that everything in real estate has context, right? And I know that it is quite unaffordable to buy a house. We are in a national housing crisis. But whether you are renting or you're purchasing, you want to make the house your home. And to do that, what we often do is put artwork, we put frames on the wall, we might put shelving, we might want to declutter things, and the only way to do that is by putting some holes in the wall, right? But what sometimes happens is people don't know how to use these tools and they damage the walls. Now that is more important if you are renting, because what happens at the end of the tenancy is the owner, the landlord, can keep your deposit to fix the damages. Now, I do have some posts on my social media accounts where I discuss how and when can an owner deduct damages on the wall, but the idea is simple, right? If you created a hole in the wall for artwork, it is usually a general wear and tear item, right? The idea is if you have a lot of holes around the wall and it's extensively damaged where the new tenant would have extensive issues with this, that is when the owner can then say, look, you damaged my wall, I had to paint it, I had to cover it up. It should feel, you as a tenant should look at the damages, and I think most people know if they damage the wall or not. But the most important part of doing that, and maybe I'll take a step back here, when you're moving into a property and you're renting, one thing that you need and want to do is to take pictures of everything. When you move into a place, under California law, and I'm sure every other state has some form of law like this, you have 3 days, or you should have 3 days, to do an inspection of the property. That is where you take into account what the place looks like, any damages that you would like the tenant to fix that you might have not noticed, and if it affects the livability of a house, the owner should take care of it. Usually most units are rented as is, which is a kind of a ridiculous way of doing things because it's as is of when, but it still stands. Now, under California law, starting I believe in May, the owners or the property managers, before you move in, should take pictures of how the unit looked like. If at the end of your tenancy, the owners do not provide the pictures of how the place looked like in the beginning, they cannot keep your deposit. They also have 21 days to give you a notice of what damages were performed in the unit and what the owners fixed. It should be an itemized list, especially if they are taking a lot of your deposit away. Be careful with owners taking away your deposit just for the sake of saying that general wear and tear was your responsibility. That is not the case. If you have any questions, please reach out to me because I see this time and time again. The other thing is that the owners, well, actually as a tenant, what you should be doing is requesting, and it is your right as a tenant in California, you want to request a move-out inspection. That can happen in the last week of your tenancy. That way, you can actually communicate between you and the owners what items they have problems with and what they are likely to deduct. That way, you as a tenant have the ability to fix the items on your own versus then being quoted something much higher after you move out. So remember, in California, the tenant and the buyers are always more protected than the sellers and the landlords. And that's why as an investor, you need to understand that once you purchase a place, it is no longer yours. Once you purchase a place, and rent it out, that property is no longer yours. So thread carefully if you're thinking of becoming an investor and becoming a Airbnb host, because there are more expenses than you think there are, and that's not with even talking about lawsuits and insurances and things that might happen along the way. But anyway, this video is more of a tutorial for drilling, so let's fire away. And this is a Ryobi drill. This is a drill found. I actually bought this at Home Depot, but they have them at every large store. I'm sure Lowe's and all the big box stores have them. They're a package where there's a drill and a saw and extra batteries. They actually have a really cool bag that I don't know where it is at the moment. If you are not really doing a lot of construction projects, you don't really need bigger drills. There are different machines, but just know that sometimes it's not, what you have, it's how you use it. So don't worry too much about the size or the strength or the battery or whatever it might be. At the end of the day, if you have a drill, that's awesome because you won't have to use a screwdriver. So we'll start now. The most basic part of the drill system is there are two little buttons here. There's going to be an arrow. When the arrow is pointing at the front of the drill, that means it is screwing in the bit to the interior. You push the other side to push out the screw. Now, what people don't know is that if you actually push it to the middle, you actually make the mechanism lock, which is really helpful if you're putting the drill in a box. It's not going to just randomly push and then waste the battery. So that's something that people don't really know that exists. Now, you see all these numbers here at the top. This is the torque. Now, what this is going to do is so that when you're operating the drill, it stops after a certain amount of force, which will stop you from going too deep into the material. And that's going to be really important because that's where the damages come in place. There's two ways to damage the material. One is by going too quickly and you're going to be crooked, which means that the hole that you're going to make is going to be larger than it should have been. But the other way is by pushing too deep into the material. When you do that, you're most likely going to crack the material, or if it's a really soft material, you might create dust around it. So in any case, start at a lower torque level, especially if it's a small screw that you're going to input, and then slowly raise the torque level. I usually keep it at a no more than 10 torque. Now, if you don't really care about the torque and you want the screw to go all the way in, you go all the way to the bottom. You can see that there's a little drill image there. That just means that it's going to continue and it's not going to stop, right? Now, I will show, at the end of the video, I will show what that means. I know that it's kind of vague and without illustrations, it doesn't really mean much. But when you have this criteria on the drill, what you can do is just continue to the drill, even though the screw is all the way in, you're then able to continue drilling it, and that actually can damage the thread, right? So be careful because once you damage the top portion of the screw, you're not going to be able to remove it later, and then it becomes more of a headache to fix the wall or whatever you're screwing in. There's another button here in the top. There's a 1 and a 2. This is actually going to be the speed of how you drill. For most purposes, you want to keep it at the 1. If you're dealing with metal, that's where you would typically turn it to a 2. But the bottom line is that this controls the speed. The faster you go, the less chance. For example, let's go a little bit back. When you're dealing with wood, if you are going fairly slow, you're going to be collecting more of the surrounding wood area, and that's what creates some of the cracks. The faster you go, the less time that the bit can collect any of the wood, so there's less likely to be cracks. However, remember that when you're going too quickly and when you rush things, that's when there's a larger chance of damage. People sometimes forget to be patient and they rush into things. And that's not, it might be fun and you might want to finish things quickly, but in the long term, you will make a mistake and it's going to be more expensive to fix. So be careful. If when you're drilling, and again, I will show this later, if when you're drilling, you see that the hole is a bit crooked, stop, take a deep breath, and start over. Because if you put in the screw crooked, it's not going to go very well, and you're going to end up having to do it again. One of the best ways to stop a screw from being crooked is by creating a little incision first, or actually by using one of these bits instead of using a screw. The other thing that we need to know about the drills is that in order to change the bit, there's always going to be lettering in the front of the chuck, and this is called a chuck. One way unlocks the mechanism and you're able to change the bit on the other end, and you want to make sure that you actually hit the teeth of this chuck, and you're going to twist it until you hear all these clicks. Now, when you're doing all this, it's not really locked in. And to lock it in, you're going to just slowly twist it so you hear one click. That has then locked in the little bit in the drill. So anyway, one recommendation that I do have is when you're buying a drill, I would suggest to buy a battery operated drill. That way you can move around more peacefully. They still have corded drills. Those are typically going to be safer, right? Just because if something happens, you can just unplug it, and it's much easier to take the power away. But these are more portable. You can use them on the go, and they usually now have. This one doesn't have it. This is an older model, but there's some that actually have a little measuring area to see if things are straight or not. You're also going to have different batteries. Some are smaller, some are bigger. So, usually you can tell when there's not a lot of battery in the drill. It's going to the humming sounds are going to be much lower. But all right, well, now it's time to make some holes. And remember, be patient, because if you're not patient, you're going to create mistakes. All right, so this is not the best way to do it, mostly because I'm kind of using an example where the materials are on the table. Usually you would be holding it from the wall and just putting it there, but I don't want to damage these walls. So, and I'm just going to first test out a small screw, just putting it in. I just have the torque level all the way to the top, and I'm going to show you how that actually damages the wood. Oh, nice. So a little bit of a blooper here. I realized that as I put in the screw in, it didn't actually really damage the wooden panel. That's mostly, there's a lot of different reasons why, but the wood that I'm using is a much higher quality material, just because there's going to be a lot of hands that open and close the kitchen cabinet. So, maybe not the best way to showcase the example of what happens when you use too much torque. However, I decided that I really wanted to show you how you would realistically do it as a best practice to screw in into drywall. Drywall is actually going to be the material that you will likely screw in at your apartment or at your home. It's a really cheap material, right? That's used in a lot of the modern buildings. It looks solid, but if you look through the middle, it's actually a mixture of concrete and sand and a whole bunch of different mixtures of things. I actually don't exactly know how they make this little white substance. In any case, what happens is when you screw something in, if the screw is carrying something that's not too heavy, it's not an issue. But when you're hanging on a picture frame that's like 20-30 pounds, the concrete here, it's not going to be able to stay solid, right? It's not like wood, it's not like a piece of metal. So the more wood, the more that it's going to pull down, and if it pulls down, the hole is just going to just open up more, and the dust is going to, exit the area. So then it's going to cause the hole to become bigger, and two, your picture will not stay in place. So the best way to actually screw something into drywall is you use these type of anchors. So you'll find these anchors at your local Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, even Target probably has them. And I like them, but I don't like them just because what this makes you do is make an even bigger hole to the drywall. So technically you're damaging the wall even more, but what this creates is that you won't actually make a mess out of the wall. So what you actually do for this is you use one of these little bad boys, and let's see if I do it right. If you have not done so at this point, please like, subscribe, send me some money, I don't know. And then, so this hole has been made at this point, right, which is what you want. Most of the time it's going to be the cross. I actually don't know what you call this. I think it's the cross. Or a Phillips head, I guess. Yeah, I think it's Phillips. Anyway. The cross-shaped bit. And I actually don't know if this is the hole is big enough, but I don't want to make it even bigger. So it's always better if you go slow. Look at that. Beautiful. And now, so what I will show you here is that from this side, it's pretty flushed. And then from this angle, there's a protective layer here. And you can't move this. Ouch. It's actually kind of. So now you can screw, and it's solid, right? So now you can just there we go. Super flush. I mean, actually, if you want to have a picture frame, you would likely have it like that, right? And it's going to be held on together. But you see this up and down, even though it's going up and down like this, from the back side, it's not moving at all, right? This is actually a perfect way to show drywall. So you probably want to put it a little bit deeper. It depends on like what type of material you're hanging here. Hopefully it is actually filming. Yeah, so this is just much more sturdy, right? Obviously, I guess. But that's actually the summary of how you secure screw into drywall. And you should not be charged security deposit if you leave a hole like this. Yeah. So you take it off. It's a pretty large hole, but it looks professional, right? It doesn't, what this also makes it's so that there's not a lot of messiness from the front, right? So there's no peeling of paint, which sometimes happens when you have screws that go up and down, right? So this will protect you against that as well, or hopefully, if you're doing it right. I mean, you can't, you can't stop an owner or landlord from using really cheap paint. So I think that can also sometimes change things. And the good news is that at the end of the day, even if you do make these holes too big, you can always buy the plaster to actually fill these holes in. The hardest part of really fixing drywall is matching the paint. When you go and lease a new apartment, you'll probably notice that there's a whole bunch of, paint marks. This is because after a year or two, paint kind of slowly changes color. I mean, it just gets burnt a little, by just general light, and it's old paint, right? So if you just brush spots of new paint, even if it's the same color paint, it's gonna look slightly different, right? So I know that sometimes people want to save money, but I would suggest that you either, well, I shouldn't say this, but I guess either paint it the right way, paint the entire place, or just don't paint it at all, because even if you cover just parts of the walls, it's gonna look messy. You're going to be able to tell that there's a different paint section there, and it might even be a bigger part of the wall that now I'm focused on that section of the wall versus me just looking around somewhere else, right? So thanks a lot for joining, guys, and if you have any other questions or any other things that you want me to review, please comment, share, and ask me any questions. Remember, there's always context. You pick your context, be accountable, I guess, for your context, but ask questions, and if you don't get the answers, maybe it's because you weren't asking the right questions. All right? Until next time.